Penguin Random House Audio presents The Jailhouse Lawyer by Calvin Duncan and Sophie Cole. Read by Aaron Goodson, with a prologue read by Calvin Duncan.
For Mamie. Prologue. Whether I shall turn out to be the hero of my own life, or whether that station would be held by anybody else, these pages must show. For 23 years, I served as an inmate counsel or jailhouse lawyer at Angola prison in Louisiana. I was incarcerated for a murder I did not commit. I learned the law in its shadows. For many of those years, I taught a law class. Of all the literature I recited to my students from the front of the room, this line from Dickens was the one I quoted most. I learned it not from reading David Copperfield, but John Irving's The Cider House Rules, a novel about an orphan named Homer Wells, who, like me, grew up without any memory of his mother. Like Homer, my and my sister's efforts to belong in someone else's home was largely a failure. From the ages of 6 or 7, we knew we was on our own, and no help was coming. As a teenager, it became apparent that my circumstances wasn't going to improve, only my ability to take things I was liking. I protected my younger sister by stealing food and clothing for her, and get into fights with boys who paid her too much attention. I stole televisions to make sure I had enough cash to pay my own bond if I got arrested, so I wouldn't have to call on my aunts. Being a man didn't mean escaping the streets, only surviving them. In prison, the notion of being a man narrowed even farther. In that environment, the whole goal is to rob you of your concept of self. To the guards, we was children. To the lawyers, we was means to an end. To the institution, we was a source of job creation. To each other, we was a conquest. Being willing to kill to protect my body from interference, that was being a man. I was lucky enough to survive that chapter of prison life. At Angola, in the main prison, I saw some of the older guys reading books, and I started to wonder if perhaps a man is someone who liberates his mind by reading. So I read Martin Luther King Jr., Dante, and Harper Lee. I spent my time with guys who was focused on helping themselves and helping others. I became friends with Wood Fox, Hooks, King, Wally Moo, Gary, Norris, Chico, and Wilbert. None of us had any realistic chance of getting out of prison at that time. Good conduct wasn't going to help us. Getting the certificate wasn't either. Our fates were sealed. We was all serving life sentences. But that didn't stop us from asking the question, what makes a man? We had come to understand how ludicrous it was that our identities as black men was reduced to our behinds. No one asks, what do you stand for? Are there any rights you have that are worth fighting to protect? Nobody expected us to live honorable lives, but we weren't willing to succumb to that view. So we helped each other get our education. We taught each other the law. We drafted bills for legislature and organized our families to support their passage. We invited judges and lawmakers to meet with us at the prison. We published investigative journalism. We led reentry programs. We sent money home to each other's children. And when miracles happened and some of us started getting out of Angola, we made sure we never forgot the men we left behind. When I finally made it out of prison, I learned not to talk about it. You realize people don't want to hear it. Even those of us who was inside together would only mention certain things. we can't share too openly about our experiences because we're still maintaining the version of ourselves that we crafted inside. A few days after my release, I met a young Australian woman named Sophie who worked with me at a law office in New Orleans. We was taking trips to Shreveport, Louisiana to campaign alongside churches and civil rights organizations for the removal of a Confederate flag from the local courthouse lawn. On those car rides, I finally found a place where I could talk honestly about my experience. Sophie asked me about my life in prison and listened to my story with openness. Having the opportunity to share without being judged helped me take stock of my life. Instead of being Calvin, the inmate lawyer, or Calvin, the innocent man, or Calvin, the orphan, or Calvin, the returning citizen, I started to see myself as a man in full. When we decided to work on a book together, we went about it the truest way we knew. My personal account, shared with a friend who had a deep appreciation of the forces I was up against. If my journey has taught me one thing, it's that God put unexpected people in our lives at the moment we need them the most. We, as a society, don't get to hear stories of Black men helping each other. Perhaps, if people was allowed to tell and to hear such stories, then we would be more inclined to ask why our country devalue Black children the way we do. Why we make a point to figure out if the whales are coming too close to the shore, or if the eagles aren't hatching enough of their young, or if the bees are dying off. But when it comes to the conditions experienced by Black boys in our neighborhood, we already seem to know all we need to know. I want the world to know that a group of Black men in the darkest place in America, the incarceration capital of the world, rose above our situations to help each other. May these pages show that it's the people from whom we expect the least who, in the face of impossible odds, do extraordinary things.
Part 1. Well then, Homer, I expect you to be of use. Dr. Larch, The Cider House Rules. 1982. Calvin had a sixth sense for being watched. He calmly folded the jeans he'd been holding against his waist and scanned the workwear supply store. The other students from the Job Corps campus rummaged through piles of flannel and cotton, still giddy at being chosen to come down the mountain. They were allowed to spend their clothing vouchers only once every few months. Calvin met his supervisor's eye and noticed the same feeling of foreboding that had woken him that morning, an old warning from childhood that signaled the approach of danger. The doorbell chimed, and a customer walked in. The cool draft sliced through his unease. This wasn't New Orleans, he reminded himself. He shouldn't always expect the worst. Calvin, his supervisor gestured him over. We need to get back to campus. What's happening? He asked. You've got visitors. Years later, when certainty was slipping away from him, Calvin would think back to his time on Mount Hood and be sure of only three things. First, the lake. Not Timber Lake, the official name of the Job Corps campus where he studied, but the crescent of water at the campus's middle, too small to have a name. He passed it each morning on his way to the welding workshop, still and iridescent, a map to find his way home. Second was the quiet, or rather the sounds of quiet, pebbles scraping under his boots and snowdrifts gathering on the dormitory roof, moments of solitude that taught him what peace felt like, a lesson he tucked beneath his ribs for safekeeping. And third, those three words, you've got visitors. The ending of the story he had worked so hard for, where he made it out of New Orleans to seize a future of his own making, and the beginning of this story, the one he couldn't seem to escape, when they came looking for him on the mountain.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?